What if the one player everyone's overlooking could be exactly what stands between the Toronto Maple Leafs and their first Stanley Cup in over half a century? The hockey world loves its shiny objects. The 50-goal scorers, the Norris Trophy winners, the goaltenders with impossible save percentages. But sometimes, championship teams are built on the players nobody sees coming. The ones who slip through the cracks while everyone else chases the obvious stars. Right now, as Brad Treliving navigates one of the most complex trade markets in recent memory, there's a name circulating in NHL front offices that most fans have barely registered. Casey Mittelstadt isn't the flashiest player available. He's not the biggest name, and he certainly isn't the safest bet, but he might just be the perfect fit for what Toronto is trying to accomplish. After months of unprecedented quiet, the NHL trade landscape is experiencing its first real tremor of activity. League insiders described this summer as unlike any in recent memory, a strange period where traditional trade season felt more like a morgue than a marketplace. General managers seemed content to wait, to watch, to let others make the first move while protecting their own assets. That calculated patience is finally cracking. Multiple sources confirm that teams are beginning to show their hands, with Casey Mittelstadt emerging as the first legitimate top six forward to become genuinely available. The 26-year-old center represents something rare in today's NHL, a skilled player entering his prime whose current team appears genuinely motivated to move him. Boston's willingness to shop Middlestat stems from a brutal reality check. The Bruins acquired him at the trade deadline not as their primary target, but as a secondary piece in a deal focused elsewhere. That lukewarm acquisition has translated into lukewarm commitment, creating an opportunity for teams like Toronto, who see potential where others see complications. Understanding Casey Mittelstadt requires embracing contradictions. He's simultaneously one of the most skilled playmakers in the league and one of the most frustrating. His highlight reel showcases vision that borders on supernatural, passes that thread through impossible gaps, setups that create scoring chances from nothing, the kind of hockey intelligence that separates good players from great ones. Yet his low-light reel tells an equally compelling story of missed opportunities, disappearing acts in crucial moments, and a kind of inconsistency that drives coaches to distraction. At 5'11" and 196 pounds, he lacks the physical presence that can mask offensive droughts. When his skill isn't clicking, there's nowhere to hide. The Boston experiment exposed both sides of this equation in stark relief. 6 points in 18 games after the trade deadline painted a picture of a player struggling to adapt, but context matters enormously. The Bruins were a fractured team dealing with their own identity crisis, veteran leadership aging out while younger players fought for roles in an unclear system. What makes Middlestat fascinating isn't his past performance. It's his untapped ceiling. Despite playing professional hockey for several years, there's a widespread belief across NHL talent evaluation departments that he hasn't even approached his potential impact. The question isn't whether he has elite skills. It's whether he can access them consistently enough to justify significant investment. Strip away the noise, and Middlestat represents exactly the type of calculated risk that championship-caliber organizations take. The Maple Leafs have built their identity around speed, skill, and creating offensive chances through creativity rather than brute force. In that system, a player like Middlestat doesn't just fit, he potentially thrives. Consider the weapons Toronto could surround him with. William Nylander's goal-scoring ability combined with Middlestat's playmaking could create the kind of dynamic partnership that opposing coaches lose sleep over. The speed and vision of both players complement each other perfectly, potentially unlocking scoring opportunities that more traditional combinations might miss entirely. The positional flexibility adds another layer of intrigue. While officially listed as a center, Middlestat has shown the ability to play wing effectively, providing head coach Sheldon Keefe with lineup options that could prove invaluable during the playoffs. Having players who can slide between positions without losing effectiveness is a luxury few teams can afford. More importantly, Middlestat addresses a longer-term need that Toronto can't ignore forever. John Tavares continues performing at an elite level, but smart organizations plan for transitions before they become emergencies. Adding a player like Middlestat could provide both immediate depth and future insurance, the kind of forward-thinking move that separates contenders from pretenders. Nothing in today's salary cap environment happens in isolation, and Middlestat's $5.75 million cap hit creates both opportunity and complexity for Toronto's front office. That number reflects legitimate NHL value. Teams don't commit nearly $6 million to role players or afterthoughts, but it also represents exactly the kind of financial commitment that requires creative maneuvering. Toronto's current cap situation sits precariously close to the ceiling, meaning any significant addition necessitates corresponding subtraction. Names like David Kampf, Kaye Jarnkrok, and Nick Robertson have been circulating in trade discussions all summer, representing the kind of salary relief that could facilitate a bigger move. The timing might actually favor Toronto's negotiating position. Boston's apparent eagerness to move Middlestat suggests they're operating from a position of weakness rather than strength. Teams don't typically shop players they value highly, and the Bruins' rebuilding reality likely prioritizes cap flexibility and future assets over present-day contributors. This creates the kind of market inefficiency that savvy general managers exploit. If Boston is motivated to move Middlestat for reasons beyond his on-ice performance, Toronto could potentially acquire him for less than his actual hockey value. That's the kind of transaction that defines successful team building in a cap-constrained league. Every potential trade involves calculated gambling, and Middlestat represents a particularly complex wager. The upside is tantalizing. A skilled playmaker entering his prime who can provide secondary scoring and positional depth for years to come. The downside is equally clear. A player whose inconsistency has followed him throughout his career and shows no signs of disappearing. At 26, Middlestat has reached the age where dramatic improvement becomes increasingly unlikely. Players tend to be who they are by their mid-20s, meaning Toronto would be betting on optimization rather than transformation. The question becomes whether the Maple Leaf system and supporting cast could help him access his best qualities more consistently. The playoff factor adds another layer of uncertainty. Middlestat's career playoff experience remains limited, and there's no guarantee that his skill set translates effectively to postseason hockey's increased intensity and reduced space. For a Toronto organization desperate to break through in the playoffs, acquiring players with postseason question marks represents a legitimate concern. Yet championship teams are often built on players who exceed expectations when it matters most. The 2019 St. Louis Blues rode contributions from unlikely heroes to their first Stanley Cup, while the 2021 Tampa Bay Lightning received crucial production from players other teams had written off. Middlestat's availability signals something more significant than a single trade opportunity. It suggests the late summer market is finally ready to move. League insiders expect a situation to trigger additional activity as teams rush to address newly created needs or capitalize on emerging opportunities. Toronto has established a reputation under Treliving as an aggressive participant in trade discussions, willing to make moves that other organizations shy away from. That reputation becomes valuable in situations like this, where sellers might prefer dealing with decisive counterparts rather than getting bogged down in endless negotiations. The Eastern Conference landscape could shift dramatically based on who lands Middlestat and what they give up to get him. If Toronto acquires him for reasonable cost, they add depth and skill without significantly weakening their prospect pool or current roster. If a division rival outbids them, the Leafs could find themselves at a competitive disadvantage heading into the season. The Middlestat decision represents more than roster construction. It reflects Toronto's championship philosophy. Are they willing to take calculated risks on players whose ceilings exceed their current performance? Do they prioritize safe, predictable contributors over potentially game-changing wild cards? Recent Stanley Cup winners have generally featured a mix of both approaches. Core stars provide the foundation, while complementary players with specific skill sets fill crucial roles. Middlestat could potentially serve either function, depending on how his Toronto tenure develops. The organizational depth question looms large as well. Adding Middlestat could push other forwards into different roles, potentially improving the overall lineup balance, while creating internal competition that elevates everyone's performance. Alternatively, it could disrupt chemistry that's taken time to develop, creating more problems than it solves. As September approaches and training camps loom, Brad Treliving faces decisions that could define Toronto's championship window. The Middlestat opportunity represents everything that makes NHL trade evaluation both thrilling and terrifying. Legitimate skill paired with legitimate risk, potential impact balance against possible disappointment. Whether Toronto ultimately pursues Middlestat or pivots to other options, his availability has officially opened the floodgates for late summer trade activity. The quiet phase is over, and the coming weeks will reveal which teams are genuinely committed to improving and which are content to stand pat. For Maple Leafs fans, the suspense is both exciting and agonizing. Every potential move carries championship implications. Every decision could be the difference between playoff success and another early exit. The stakes have never been higher, and the margin for error has never been smaller. Are you ready for Toronto to roll the dice on Middlestat, or should they play it safe and look elsewhere? The clock is ticking toward training camp, and Treliving's next move could change everything. Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you're as invested in the Leafs championship chase as we are.